The tanks moved not for ceremony but for consequence. At Bemowo-Piski and across the Polish ranges, columns of Abrams and Strykers sloughed through mud and mist, artillery found aim under a gray sky, and Apache rotors carved a hush into the air long enough for commanders to evaluate the small differences between training and application. This was not a show of muscle for domestic consumption. It was rehearsal in the language modern states understand: logistics, surge, and the ability to put weight on the map where it matters most. What unfolded in Poland was two stories in parallel. First, the battle group that has guarded the eastern flank since 2017, laying live-fire training into the Suwalki corridor. Second, the demonstrable proof that NATO can, and now will, scale from battle group to brigade under crisis conditions. Together, they form an unmistakable editorial line. NATO is not simply present, it is preparing to be decisive and sustainable. That distinction is the difference between deterrence that can be read in a briefing and deterrence that compels an opponent to recalculate. Live rounds are the blunt instrument of clarity. In the Suwalki area, Romanian Gepards and British Jackals moved with American Bradleys and Abrams in a choreography designed for one outcome: interoperability under stress. When Lieutenant Colonel William Branch described the imperatives, the sovereignty of Eastern NATO nations under pressure, the need to hold the corridor that links the Baltic states to Poland, his words were tactical, but the signal was strategic. The Suwalki Gap is not an abstract line on a map. It is a vulnerability, a funnel, and for NATO, it is a hinge. If that hinge were to be seized or paralyzed, the operational geometry of Eastern Europe changes overnight. Exercises like these make taking that hinge look costly and uncertain to anyone calculating advantage. At the same time, Griffin shock demonstrated another capability: the alliance's capacity to surge significant combat power quickly. The arrival of the 2nd Cavalry Regiment, a road march from Germany into Poland, bringing Strykers, Apaches, and long-range fires, changed the local force equilibrium not by rhetoric, but by tonnage. What was once a battalion presence was expanded, on rotation, into brigade-sized punch. That matters. In war planning terms, the ability to escalate not only in intent, but in mass and duration is the practical glue of extended deterrence. This is where the calculus shifts from posture to punishment. For Moscow, the sequence of publicized drills, live-fire battle groups, and rapidly reinforced brigade elements cannot be dismissed as mere theater. The question becomes operational. How much will it cost to achieve objectives if NATO can stack forces and synchronize fires rapidly? The answer, in the cold arithmetic of strategy, raises the price of miscalculation. There is political texture beneath the metal. Hungary's adaptive hussars, the exercises there, and the continuing complexity of allied relationships are not accidental footnotes. Budapest's domestic politics, its energy ties, and periodic friction with the Brussels axis add a layer of diplomatic unpredictability that both NATO planners and Russian strategists must digest. Yet when Budapest hosts significant exercises, and when Hungary's forces train shoulder to shoulder with Italian, Croatian, and Turkish units, the political ambiguity bends toward operational reality. Alliances are being reinforced in practice, even where rhetorical unity is strained. The footage from these exercises is sober evidence of a new normal in European defense: collective action that privileges speed and depth. The NATO battle groups, originally conceived as tripwires and signals, are being tested for another function: not only to warn, but to anchor and to grow. The upgrade to brigade scale, even if rotational, proves that the alliance practices not only immediate deterrence, but the logistics of sustained response. A battle group deters by its presence. A brigade deters by its potential to shape campaigns. That potential is not theoretical. Griffin shock showed long-range fires coordinated with air support, attack helicopters operating from forward arming and refueling points, and mobile artillery such as Croat Panzer Haubitze 2000, delivering reach that complicates adversary assumptions about depth and sanctuary. Close air support and rotary aviation, when paired with armored maneuver, create windows of operational leverage. Those windows are where battles are decided. They're also the same windows that, if threatened by an adversary, force strategic rethink. The narrative most likely running through Moscow's operational rooms is simple and stark. NATO is integrating depth into its posture, closing the gap between token presence and credible reinforcement. That reduces the time it takes for an Allied response to become meaningful. It increases the risks any actor must weigh before attempting rapid seizures or shaping operations designed to unbalance forward defenses. In plain terms, these exercises are built to turn a fleeting tactical opportunity into a strategic liability for an attacker. But this messaging is not delivered in a vacuum. It arrives in a region steeped in history, where geography amplifies consequence. The Suwalki corridor links Kaliningrad to Belarus and is a corridor that, if contested, would sever the contiguous land route to the Baltic states. Holding that corridor, therefore, is not a tactical desire, but a strategic imperative. From the perspective of capitals watching from Moscow to Brussels, the existence of a reinforced brigade-ready force inside Poland changes the calculation about the feasibility of any operation that aims to isolate the Baltics from Warsaw. The public nature of these maneuvers itself is a tool. NATO and its members are deliberately letting the footage circulate. Armored units on the move, mortars firing, commanders on camera explaining the logic of deterrence. Visibility serves two functions. It reassures allies that commitments have teeth, and it signals to potential challengers that NATO's capacity is not confined to classified plans, but is verifiable in the field. Visible credibility has a practical effect. It constrains misperception and compresses the cognitive space in which an adversary might choose to gamble. Yet the rehearsals raise hard questions about escalation management. If NATO can rapidly assemble and project brigade-level forces, how will that affect the threshold for kinetic action by a rival? The paradox of strong deterrence is that the clearer your capacity to escalate, the more you must manage the risk of perceived provocation. Exercises therefore must walk a tactical tightrope. They must be visible enough to deter, but not so rehearsed as to be interpreted as preparation for imminent offensive action. That balance is political and inherently fragile. Domestically, the politics of presence also matter. Public opinion inside NATO countries can be ambivalent about deeply forward-postured deployments. In democracies, leaders must sustain public support for policies that keep boots and expensive platforms at range. NATO's approach, rotating brigade-sized reinforcements, rehearsing interoperability, and publicizing outcomes, is as much a media strategy as it is a military one. It is designed to normalize readiness and to translate alliance commitments into defensible narratives for domestic audiences. The logic of reinforcement, as demonstrated in Griffin shock, further complicates strategic planning for any potential adversary. The 2nd Cavalry's road march from Vilsek into Poland is not mere a logistical footnote. It is proof that major combat power can be moved with relative speed across Allied infrastructure. In the event of a crisis, the ability to funnel maneuver units and deep fires into a theater changes timelines decisively. What once might have required weeks to assemble can now be initiated in days. That temporal compression is a deterrent in itself. Of course, NATO's choices also reflect learning from recent conflicts. Modern warfare's reliance on drones, precision fires, and distributed lethality means that the old templates of concentration are outdated. The alliance is evolving toward dispersion with connectivity, smaller, more capable units operating in synchrony, linked by sensors and fires. This is visible in the training. The combined arms concept, repeatedly referenced by commanders, is not nostalgic for mass. It is adaptive. It integrates anti-access challenges, contested logistics, and multi-domain coordination into a single continuum of combat power. For Russia, this shift poses a strategic problem. If NATO can interpose depth and sustainment into the Eastern theater with speed and redundancy, then the window for achieving quick, decisive operational effects narrows. Russian planners therefore must either accept a prolonged conflict with attrition at scale, a prospect that carries heavy political and economic costs, or continue to seek asymmetric means to undermine NATO's cohesion and delay its reinforcement timelines. That competition now includes not just force structure, but infrastructure resilience, political resolve, and information campaigns aimed at peeling away Allied unity. Which brings us back to the political dimension. Exercises in Poland and the rotational brigade deployments are testimonies to a principle interwoven into contemporary deterrence. Credibility is performative. It must be performed in public and in practice. The broadcasts from Bemowo-Piski and the march of the 2nd Cavalry into the battle group's base are performative acts intended to be observed, recorded, and judged. There is much about audience perception as they are about tactical refinement. This is why the conversation these events provoke is not mere punditry, it is strategy in real time. Allies will watch for lessons about logistics, command integration, and the speed at which reinforcements can be fielded. Adversaries will watch for vulnerabilities to exploit, the seams between national systems, the tempo of cross-border movements, and political fissures that can be amplified. The health of NATO's deterrence, therefore, will be measured not only by what units possess, but by the political fabric that supports their movement. In the end, deterrence lives in the mind of the decision-maker who contemplates the first move. Exercises like those in Poland are designed to make that mind pause longer and calculate deeper. They do not promise peace by themselves, they shift the arithmetic that makes peace more likely. And in a region where uncertainty is the constant variable, even a small shift in calculation can change outcomes profoundly.